Welcome back, friends, to Alpha Beta Soup. I'm TXMC. Well, today's video will be a little different. We'll be light on the market analysis, but instead, what I really want to show you are some various metrics I've observed with on-chain that are showing some signs of life, some signs of hope for Bitcoin, regardless of the apprehension we may express about the short to medium term for markets. You know, the last couple videos, we've talked about recession signals, inflation concerns, commodity prices, and a lot of bearishness and concern. But there is underlying foundational growth occurring for our favorite hard money asset here in Bitcoin. If you enjoy my content, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all of your support, and before long we will have 13,000 subscribers. Incredible. So let's start talking about Bitcoin. As I sit here watching us try to battle back over the short-term holder cost basis, I thought it would be interesting to show you a few of the signs of life I see out there for Bitcoin on-chain specifically. You know, we've been talking about a lot of caution in the market, a lot of apprehension and bearishness, potential recession signals, war in Ukraine, commodity problems, you know, all of these things that have been weighing on us. But I do think it's important to also keep an open mind about positive things we see happening for the market, bullish dynamics occurring for investors, and places where we can identify positive trends forming in the various metrics we use to assess Bitcoin and the markets. But we'll bounce around today and I'll show you a couple of places where there are little buds breaking the surface of the ground, little leaves poking through, the first little droplets of sap starting to seep out of the tree trunks. There are signs of positivity out there in the market. And while I do have greater concerns that the macro landscape may prevent Bitcoin from achieving some of its own potential in the short term, it's valuable to identify where we see growth and where we see bullishness. So let's not waste any time and let me show you some of the things I've been looking at. What we've got on this chart is the Bitcoin price change month over month based on the hour of day and where it corresponds to global market sessions in the regions of the United States, Europe, and Asia. Because of the geographic separation of the US, Europe, and Asia, there's very little overlap in their market hours. So it's interesting to look at how price has changed for each of those regions over time. And what I noticed is from November to now, basically since the market peak to now, the United States market session and the European market sessions have both been seeing mixed gains and mixed losses, but relatively kind of net positive when you look at the green and the red together, right? But look at what Asia has been experiencing. Essentially since middle November, the Asian market hours have been leading most of the downturn for Bitcoin's price action. And I find that really interesting. You know, between the crypto crackdowns going on in China, a bunch of users having to exodus off of various exchanges and probably removing their coins as a result or selling out. Also, various debt crises unfolding in China related to their real estate market and whatever knock-on effects that might have for people holding risk assets like Bitcoin, or at least assets they may perceive as risk. So they've been leading a lot of the downturn. There's a bunch of red here for the Asian session, but what do you know? Just recently, we're starting to see signs of life. Look at that. A little bit of positivity here for the Asian session. I don't know that this means a whole lot for Bitcoin or the markets, but I thought it was noteworthy that we can observe such a heavy bearishness experienced by this part of the world for this one asset compared to the other two markets that predominantly trade in it. And we've finally seeing a break in that trend and a softening. So I wanted to point that out. I thought that was pretty cool. And these charts are interesting. These are some of the newer charts they've got over on Glassnode, and I thought these guys did a good job with this, so I wanted to use them in one of the videos, and this is a cool observation. Moving on now, here we are looking at addresses with a non-zero balance. This means any address that has any amount of Bitcoin greater than zero. Now, the growth of this metric tends to be up and to the right over time because addresses are infinite and creating them is almost arbitrary. And a lot of wallet software nowadays tends to create new addresses for you unless you interrupt that process. So there are always new addresses being created. Seeing it go up is not that valuable, but what I do think is curious to observe at times is the rate of change of addresses with non-zero balance, how quickly it rises. So what we've got on here in black is Bitcoin price. In the gray line is just plain old addresses with non-zero balance here. But blue is the rate of change over a 90-day period, the growth of it. And, it's pretty cool to look at when you see the bull run, the rate of growth of this metric all the way up through the market peak. And it's indicative of activity of some kind, not necessarily buying or selling, but some kind of spend activity on chain is occurring and new addresses are being created, or at least addresses that have a balance of some sort are growing in number. Now, this metric collapsed very hard throughout May, June, and July, and it found a bottom in late July, around the time the market flipped back to the upside. We're really seeing steady growth out of this particular metric, and remember, this is a 90-day rate of change. So I interpret that to mean that there's more activity occurring on chain as we're moving forward through time here and getting away from what was really a kind of intense, very small bear market through May, June, and July, and in some ways has persisted throughout the last several months in ways that we've explored here on the channel. But the notable thing here for me that I wanted to call out was the increasing rate of change of non-zero addresses. I think it's showing more activity occurring on chain here in recent weeks. Now, piggybacking off of addresses with a non-zero balance and the growth of it, if we see active addresses and active entities, and then down here at the bottom, I've got transaction counts, all of these things are also structurally rising, or at least maintaining their steadiness. Active addresses has not reached back to a new high, but it's kind of expanding here, and I would say has maintained relative structural integrity considering the drawdown and all of the drama that's gone on the last few months. But active entities, now these are individual participants on chain, right? They may have one or more of these addresses over here, but the clustering algorithms that Glassnode uses has identified some of them as entities. This value is at the highest level it's been at since the middle of May, basically since right before the crash. Look at that, May 16th, May 17th. That was the last time we had this level of active entities. I do like seeing that. It's important to point out with entity growth, this metric needs time to bake in because it uses clustering algorithms. There's a bit of time of it processing and learning through the activity on the ledger. So when you see a jump in like one day of an entity-based metric on Glassnode, I don't like to react to it that quickly. I like to give it some time. So, if I zoom in here, it's clearly rising. The rate of change is increasing as well. Good to see that. And it's made what appears to be a high over the all-time high from November, the all-time high in price. So that's good. This is all positive and constructive, and it's structurally rising. We're also seeing the same thing down here with entity-adjusted transactions. And this one also rising quickly in recent days and almost back over the high from November here. Structurally rising. This is a positive. I do want this activity to continue. I want this trend to continue forward. It doesn't mean that we're in a bull market, but it's showing growth on the network over time at a period where price is not exactly sexy. So again, as we mentioned as the theme of the video here, we're seeing positives. Although we have a general bearish outlook for the next few months, the short to medium term, there are positives underneath the surface. And it's possible that if these headwinds continue to grow, they may threaten my bearish thesis. We'll have to see. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but this is the kind of thing to keep an eye on as we move forward here over the next few months. Digging in a little deeper on active entities. So I was just showing how it had been rising quickly in recent days and had popped over the high it had been at in November. We can see on my chart here, this is my version of that same chart. And the reason I wanted to look at this is because I've designed this chart so that it prints up here on the price chart when the monthly average of active entities is higher than the yearly average. It's a way of oscillating short-term activity compared to the medium long-term trend. And this value has finally jumped back over the yearly average here in the last couple of weeks, and we're seeing a print. This would be a bullish print on this particular chart of active entities on a 30-day basis being higher than the yearly average. That's great. Now, again, this isn't a bull market signal, but when we're looking for health of the network, when we're trying to compare Bitcoin at periods of time, we look at it in these ways. We look at short-term moving averages compared to longer ones, and we want to see network activity upward and to the right, and rate of change increasing at key moments. So that's what we've got here. That's the recipe. It's really rebounded impressively from July lows, and now we've jumped back over. Now, partially, it's worth pointing out, part of this jump is due to the base effect of the long-term moving average falling down here. It's been lowering ever since May and April when it was at its high point. So it coming down to meet the monthly average of active entities is in part a dampening of the bullishness of this signal. It would be different from this point over here where active entities breaks way above the yearly average, right? This is a different kind of signal from this one over here, but constructive nonetheless and worth pointing out. And you know, I visualized this in one other way because I wanted to show how these streaks in growth can occur at different points in Bitcoin cycles. So what we're showing here, we've got the active entity growth down here at the bottom in the background, which is this metric we've been unpacking throughout this episode. And what these blue and red lines here represent are the days, the consecutive days of this metric rising or falling. And throughout the bull run in 2020, you can see there's periods where it rises and then kind of resets, rises and resets in these surges, these impulses upward. And we get a streak of a couple of weeks of decline, and then 2 or 3 more weeks of growth, and then a smaller period of decline, and then a bigger surge of growth. And you note how each of these blue lines is longer than the one before it? Interesting, right? There's growing activity, and even the pullbacks are a little bit stronger in duration as this market is expanding in an accordion-like fashion until you finally get this big blow-off growth in entities. Over 100 days of a streak here of growth, and each of these little orange spots here is showing you an all-time high. So as we're breaking out and ripping to new prices, we're seeing growth in entities, active participants on chain. But as we get to the market top, things start to slow down. We're not hitting highs at quite the frequency we were before, and the amount of participants on chain starts to slow down and decline. And then what do you know? We get these really prolonged streaks where the network is pulling back, a recessionary period for entities for Bitcoin. And this went on for a long time. If you put these two together, this is about 180 days, half a year or so of declines in active entities. But since this period here around the beginning of Q3 of last year, we've been receiving these stretches of entity growth. You see these blue lines of 57 days, 54 days, then a pullback period through November and December when it really was kicking off. But interestingly, as we're now here in 2022, we're seeing again additional streaks of growth in active entities, in people on chain transacting in Bitcoin in one way or another. And we're seeing this growth, these multiple blue lines here with just a little bit of pullback in the middle at a time when price is not exactly performing at its best. So I think this is a very constructive undercurrent for Bitcoin. Now it's hard to say what it would lead to. I still think that with possible recession signals, with interest rates rising, it's hard to know how much the markets can handle, how much upside they can really get out of these conditions. When we see this positive development underneath the surface, under the hood, it can help reinforce our longer term thesis for Bitcoin. Those of you who are like myself, who are dollar cost averaging into a position that you plan to hold for many years, you know, my Bitcoin plans are a decade plus down the road. Seeing this kind of growth in the face of all of the drama going on geopolitically, the war in Ukraine, all the concerns people people have about privacy, about the sovereignty of their wealth, about their melting buying power, concerns with inflation, market stability. You got all that shit going on, and we still have more and more people each day transacting on chain at the base layer for Bitcoin. And just to show you that what we're experiencing from the growth side is similar to a bull-bear cycle for Bitcoin, here's what the 2017 and 18 market looked like. It's very similar when you look at it through the same lens. Here we've got highs ticking off day after day, and you've got these oscillating streaks of growth. Big period of growth, few weeks of pullback. Big period of growth, few weeks of pullback. And each of these periods of growth is about the same size until you get this big surge into the blow off top and the all-time high that we knew from 2017 and 18. And then right after that, a prolonged period, 115 days of declining entity growth. Then a little pullback in that process and another long, almost 2-month stretch. This is very similar to the process that we're undergoing now. The only difference is price pulled back considerably more in the 2018 bear market than what we've experienced over here in 2021. But in terms of growth on chain and underlying activity and interest, the patterns are much the same. So that helps to reinforce my long-term subterranean time preference for Bitcoin. That's what I wanted to show you today. I wanted to show you that there are constructive developments occurring on-chain underneath for Bitcoin. Rising activity, more transactions, more entity counts, more active addresses, the kind of foundational growth you want to see in bullish and bearish periods alike. We are witnessing those patterns, and they're occurring at a period of tumultuousness for markets, which helps to strengthen my belief and my conviction in my investment. Make sure you're following me here on Twitter at TXMC Trades. I post a lot of my charts, thoughts, and analysis here, and it's a good place to interact with me. I am traveling this week. I am at Bitcoin conference, so I may be slow to respond to comments and feedback you leave for me. But please, if you have questions, thoughts about what we've talked about, if you find our way of analyzing the markets valuable, or you have any feedback for me and this channel, you are welcome to leave them in the comments, and I look forward to reading them. But that's it. Told you what I was thinking about, and I leave you with some positive thoughts about our long-term thesis, regardless of what's happening in the shorter and medium term for markets. So until the next time we meet, take care of yourselves, friends, take care of your families, be kind to each other, and we will chat again soon. Cheers.